Flintstones are coming. On video cassette, it's rock-solid fun for the entire family. The Flintstones, coming on video cassette November 8th.
Hello, all you yabba dabba dorks out there, and welcome to Cinemarcade. That's what they call. That's what fans of the Flintstones call themselves. Welcome to Cinemarcade.
I somewhat doubt that.
Oh, it's what they call themselves. I can tell you that. Yeah, for sure. I'm sorry, I lost Justin already. This is Cinemarcade. This is the podcast about movies, video games, and the sparks that fly when those two worlds collide. My name is Steve Guntley, the Modern Stone Age podcast host, and who is joining me today?
I'm J-Ban, a stone from the Rock Age.
I'm going to wrap my head around that because that's about as sophisticated as any of the rock puns in this movie, so I'm going to let it slide.
I'm Justin, and I've never been stoned.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thanks.
That's a really dark turn.
Yeah.
Do
Do you mean drug stoned or do you mean beaten to death with rocks?
Both.
Okay,
Honestly,
because both happened in this movie. Yeah, I'm sure at some point or another. The movie we're talking about, of course, is The Flintstones. That's right. This is the movie from 1994 based on the popular cartoon series. A truly, truly, truly bizarre movie to go back to 30 years on. Yeah, this is about to hit its 30th anniversary in just a few weeks here. And holy hell, what a bizarre movie. It's still kind of one of a kind. Like, you have to give it that. But we'll get into this a little bit. Let's talk about our movie. It's called The Flintstones. It was released May 27th, 1994. Yeah, just in case you forgot. It was directed by Brian Levant. It's written by Tom Parker, Jim Janowin, and Stephen E. D'Souza.
And 35 writers went to the Writers Guild of America.
People.
Wait, what?
So many
35 writers worked on this, and they had to go to arbitration to
Yeah.
see who got credit for it.
Yeah,
Jesus.
Rick Moranis had given an interview where he estimated it was about 18, and yeah, it turned out to be more than almost just about double that. It was kind of ridiculous. But this stars John Goodman, Rick Moranis, Elizabeth Perkins, Rosie O'Donnell, Kyle MacLachlan, Halle Berry, and Elizabeth Taylor. So, of course, for the few people who may not know, because The Flintstones is quite old, it was an animated series from Hanna-Barbera. It ran from 1960 to 1966. It was the very first primetime animated sitcom. So it aired at a nighttime slot. And it was the most successful animated series ever until the show that inspired The Simpsons came along and basically ate its lunch. I think it's lasted about 70 times as long as any Flintstones. So this show, the whole concept of The Flintstones.
The Simpsons, is it older than me?
The Simpsons
Yeah.
is way older than you.
Yeah.
It came out in 1989. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. No, it's older. So yeah, the idea behind The Simpsons, or I'm going to keep doing that. The idea behind The Flintstones, if you don't know, it's just juxtaposing modern day sitcom tropes in a Stone Age kind of setting. It's a suburb in the Stone Age with cavemen and dinosaurs, I feel like I don't really need to explain the Flintstones because they are still a part of pop culture in a weird
They
way.
are still part of pop culture.
Like they're still on cereal boxes, they're still on vitamins, but like this has not really been a top tier property for a while. I can't imagine that there are probably some younger kids who just don't really have a frame of
Wouldn't
reference.
it be
to the
great if there was
Flintstones.
like a whole TikTok generation that was just like super into the Flintstones?
Dude, you know what I found out the kids are into?
What?
George Lopez. The George Lopez show that ran in like the late 90s, early 2000s, whatever it is. Kids are really into that show.
Well, doesn't
Go
he have
figure.
another show now?
No, I probably. I don't know. Yeah.
I
but
feel like there's another sitcom style show that he is one of the starring characters in now.
I just learned that recently that like kids are really into that. They're really into that, and they're really into Modern Family. I think that's kind of supplanting The Office right now. But anyway,
That's what the kids are into these days.
hey, go, good for you. I guess that's just what's being syndicated. But yeah, no, I think if you think of the Flintstones, for me, I immediately go to vitamins. I go to Fruity Pebbles. You know, I go to all these products that they're kind of still hawking. That they
oh my
somehow
God, Fruity Pebbles.
they somehow kind of
fucking
survive.
love
Like
Fruity
I
Pebbles.
loved Cocoa Pebbles.
oh, okay. So
It was
Cocoa Pebbles was too
so
much for me.
good.
It was too much.
I think I liked Fruity Pebbles more than Cocoa Pebbles, but I did enjoy Cocoa Pebbles.
I think my rule with cereal is yellow box over red box, because yellow box is going to be your honeycomb, your corn pops, your golden grams. You know, your red boxes, yeah, you're going to get your Trix and your Fruity Pebbles, but you know, your Lucky Charms, it's a bit too much. It's all too sugary if it hits the
Trix
red
is
box.
so-
This is my cereal tip for
love
the day.
Trix.
But you know, so obviously with this show being such a success for so long, there were many attempts to get this onto the screen, usually in an animated form. I think there are a lot of different TV movies, and a lot of ideas were bandied around for a long time.
I hope there's a Flintstones Christmas special. I'm gonna dig that up this Christmas.
Oh no, there definitely is, because I remember somebody used to make a joke about it that like it's a Simpsons Christmas special that takes place hundreds of years before Jesus was born. So like, yeah, they have to kind of find a way to work around that.
You keep saying Simpsons
There
when you
was
mean
a-
to say
Oh, I am
Flintstones.
going to keep doing that. I'm sorry, folks. I am going to keep doing it. Just know I really mean the Simpsons, the one from the Stone Age one. You know, the Simpsons. Okay, we cleared that up. Now we're good. That was a bit,
Flintstones
just in case
Christmas
anyone's confused.
is a 1977 animated Christmas television special.
There it is. Yeah, so the script for this movie first came out in 1985. Joel Silver, the producer, requested it from future Die Hard writer Stephen E. D'Souza. That's right. The original version of this was written by the same guy who did Die Hard. Lethal Weapon director Richard Donner was attached to direct this movie. And allegedly, the original script was going to be weirdly serious and poignant. Bedrock was going to experience a kind of Great Depression, during which Fred and Barney would lose their jobs and have to move west. You know, so they were going for like a Grapes of Wrath with the Flintstones thing, which is a strange choice. That being said, probably my favorite piece of Flintstones media ever is a graphic novel series that came out probably about a decade ago now. That it's by Mark Russell, and it is reimagining Fred and Barney as like PTSD-stricken war buddies from like that, you know, and that Bedrock is like a colony that was built on top of indigenous land. It's a weirdly poignant, weirdly good comic book. I don't know if it would be right for this era when they were trying to make this, or for this vibe they're going for.
Okay, this sounds so bizarre.
Read this. I swear to God, I think it only lasted for like 2 trade paperbacks. Hanna-Barbera did this weird run of graphic novels that kind of reimagined all their characters. So you got a post-apocalyptic Scooby-Doo. You got Wacky Races reimagined as a gritty, hard R Mad Max style thing. And then you had my favorite, Snagglepuss, where they reimagined him as a closeted gay 1950s playwright during like who's like trying to hide his identity. He's like a Tennessee Williams type, or a Truman Capote. It's bizarre, and it's so good. So props to Hanna-Barbera for taking some weird swings with their properties and graphic novels a couple years ago. These are all real. I swear to God, these are all real. I read all of these first day. They were so great. All right, so the script for this was eventually snatched up by Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment. No surprise, Spielberg was a big fan of the cartoon. And Spielberg had recently worked on the movie Always with John Goodman, and he just kind of thought immediately, like, this is the guy we need to have for Fred Flintstone. So he passed directing duties off to his friend Brian Levant. He's best known for making loud, brightly colored, and kind of stupid kids films. So this is the guy who did Problem Child, Beethoven, Jingle All the Way, Snow Dogs. You know, that's kind of the zone he operates in. And Levant reportedly held these massive roundtable writing sessions. Like we said, up to 35 writers were trying to claim credit for this movie. I'm going to say that's too many writers for one movie. You know, he would just kind of like sit them down and have them all pitch jokes in a circle, I guess, but like that does make it hard to figure out who actually gets credit and who actually gets like paid by the WGA.
It's always interesting when you come from like the different methods of like, okay, well, we're going to write this movie around bits.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just like fishing for bits to add into the movie.
Yeah.
But it's always an interesting thing when it's like, okay, we're trying for jokes. That's what we want here.
That's the thing. And yeah, I would argue this movie is pretty tonally inconsistent, maybe as a result of the Too Many Cooks approach here.
No.
But, you know, so Spielberg had always said that, like, if they didn't have John Goodman in this movie, they weren't going to do the movie, but they still had to do some kind of contract negotiation bullshit. So they approached a lot of different people. They talked to Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, John Candy, all of which were considered for Fred. But ultimately, like, Goodman kind of, I mean, let's be honest, he kind of owns this part. Like, this is definitely, it's one of those things like, you know, you're casting Danny DeVito as the Penguin. It's just like, there really isn't a second choice. Like, this is, for the look that you're going for.
They were
for
considering
this guy.
Danny DeVito for Barney?
For Barney. Oh, yeah, for this. Yeah, I thought you meant the dinosaur for a second. No. Yeah, and it was DeVito who actually passed because he said he couldn't do the voice. But he was the one who suggested Rick Moranis get it.
Rick Moranis, like, I love Rick Moranis.
I love Rick Moranis.
I
he rules.
just imagined, and for a person that doesn't imagine things very well, I was expecting like Danny DeVito with his basically wearing like the world's shittiest Barney the dinosaur costume.
Yeah. I'm Barney.
He directed Death to Smoochie.
He did. Yeah, he did direct Death to Smoochie.
I don't
That's
know what
right.
that is,
Oh,
but-
yeah, that's a weird satire. It came out in like 2001.
But I'm not familiar with Rick Moranis. I don't think there's many things that I've seen him in.
Well, he's been
other than
retired.
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
He's been retired for like 20 years now.
Yeah.
Because his wife died and he wanted to focus on raising his kids. So, but he was a big name in the 80s and 90s. He came from SCTV, which was the kind of Canada's version of Saturday Night Live. That's where Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara, John Candy, all those people came from. And then he had, you know, Ghostbusters and Little Shop of Horrors, and he kind of had an unlikely movie star run for a couple of years there, you know. And John Goodman's sort of in the same boat around this time. You know, he's a well-regarded character actor, and Roseanne is the biggest show on TV at this time. So, like, you know, we got a little run of John Goodman movie star roles.
So much Roseanne. That was probably my mom's favorite show.
Oh, it's a great show.
I remember watching it all the time. I cannot remember a single plot from it. Like, I'm just like, I don't know.
They open a loose meat sandwich shop. I remember that.
One that comes to mind is when Dan, because his character's Dan, finds out that Roseanne's sister Jackie was being abused by her boyfriend, and he like fucking goes
He
off.
goes to jail. He goes to jail for that. Yeah, that was a good episode.
And that was the thing about the show, is that it hit so many topics of like all the different things that were like, it was just, I don't know, very enriching, I guess, especially as a younger kid.
And
it was a lot of exposure to things in like usually healthy ways.
Yeah. Well, I love John Goodman. Like now, like he's always been one of my favorites.
Second time on the podcast.
That's right. Yeah, when was the first?
Blues Brothers 2000.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Okay.
And although everybody else, I feel like 10 Cloverfield Lane is polarizing sometimes.
That's one of my favorite performances
of his.
It's
so good.
I fucking loved him in that movie.
He's so scary in that movie.
He's terrifying in that movie.
He does
for
so
a guy who
well.
has such like a gentle giant kind of energy. Like he is so scary in that movie. You know, and so this is kind of his highest profile role to date. They had some other casting coups here, including the very final film performance of Elizabeth Taylor. I really need to like let that settle. Film legend Elizabeth Taylor, Oscar winner, you know, kind of a Hollywood icon. Her final movie is a Razzie-nominated performance in the live-action Flintstones as the battle axe mother-in-law. She lived for another 14 years after this, but she did not do another movie.
I think I don't know. I think Elizabeth Taylor's a lot like when we were talking last week about Bill Nye.
Yeah.
I just feel like she's fucking there. You know, she's there to play. She's there to fuck around and find out. And,
I hope she had fun. Yeah. I mean, she does. I think the last time we see her on screen is Fred imagining her being chewed on by a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Which was also like the weirdest cutaway. I was like, wait. All right, that's where we're at.
That is one of a handful of moments in this movie that got a genuine laugh out of me. Like, there's just the abruptness of that cutaway and like how kind of clunky looking it is. Like that made me laugh a bit.
Did you watch this as a child?
Yes, I had seen this movie at least once, if not twice, and so I remembered decent chunks of it, but
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't remember most of it.
I was 10 or 11 when this movie came out, and I knew it first and foremost as a McDonald's tie-in. McRibs. This is where McRibs comes from, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, I believe this is the beginning of the McRib, which has become like an annual tradition. Are you checking that?
I'm
check
checking.
that.
I'm gonna check
Oh,
that.
don't worry, I'm already checking it.
Because that's become sort of a
It was first introduced to the McDonald's menu in 1981.
Oh, okay. All right. Never mind then. Yeah. This was my first time being aware of the McRib. Maybe it was like a promotion that they brought back, but
It was not immediately successful.
I mean, still to this day, no one knows what it is in that meat. Like, it is meat that is shaped to have bones but does not have bones.
A portion of my teenage life that I really loved the McRib.
So
the McRib.
it was
so good.
The McRib was apparently pretty unsuccessful, and so they stopped it, and then every once in a while they would bring it back, kind of like how they still do. But the first time that it like hit was as part of the tie-in with the Flintstones.
Okay, so
Okay.
that makes sense.
That makes sense. They were really emphasizing it, and the imagery of Fred having the big rack of ribs put on the side of his car and then it tips over. That's like very iconic.
Oh, God.
But we had the frosted
this
like
Wikipedia-
glasses, we had the Happy Meal toys. Like,
Yeah.
McDonald's went hard on this movie, and that's why
I remember
Rock-
that's a lot of the McDonald's tie-in so much from my childhood.
Some of the McDonald's around the country changed their signs out for a little bit to be the Rock Donald sign, like the week that movie came out.
This article has just reminded me of the most angry I've been at McRib, other than I guess recent events, or at McDonald's, other than recent events.
Okay.
Which was all of the fucking McRib farewell tours, where they lied to us and said it would never come back, and then they brought it back a few years later, and then they're like, no, it's going away, and then oh god.
Like Barbara Streisand. Am I right, guys? Am I right,
Like
my
the
bros?
Disney Vault.
There you go. Yeah, the Disney Vault is nonsense, except for Song of the South. That's locked in there. It's never coming out, with very good reason. So, we in addition to Elizabeth Taylor, we have a very young and extremely sexy Halle Berry. We have,
Oh god.
We have Kyle MacLachlan straight off of Twin Peaks, right before his breakout turn in Showgirls. And then there are just a bunch of random cameos in here. Jay Leno, Sam Raimi is in here, Harvey Korman, Mel Blanc, and the B-52s who recorded much of the soundtrack as the BC-52s.
The incredibly fuzzy cameo from Jay Leno.
Very fuzzy,
I
very
was
fuzzy.
like, wait a minute, is that?
I think
Jay
that's where
Leno?
Sam Raimi is too. Yeah,
I
he's
think
in that
you
scene.
neglected to mention that Rosie O'Donnell has a pretty big role in this.
Rosie O'Donnell and Elizabeth Perkins as well. Elizabeth Perkins beat out Gina Davis and Catherine
Davis would have
O'Hara
been really
for that
good.
part.
Oh, and
Catherine
Catherine
O'Hara would have been
O'Hara.
amazing. And I don't know who else they were considering for Betty, but apparently Rosie O'Donnell nailed it because she got the laugh
got the
right.
Betty laugh.
Yeah, she knows the laugh. And Rosie O'Donnell was kind of like a hot prospect at this time. Like, she was being put in a lot of movies. This movie cost about $46 million, which was quite a steep budget at the time, but it proved to be a big hit. Like, you wanted to look that up beforehand because it seems like one of those movies that should be a big flop. But it wasn't.
I did not say that.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I feel like it's a movie that feels like it should have failed, but no, it made quite a bit of money.
That's a bold choice. I think this movie succeeds.
Well, and so okay, I guess I'm not even picking on the quality of the movie. There's just an ostentatious kind of quality to this movie that just has like disaster kind of written on it.
I love the production design in this movie.
Yeah.
The Jim Henson puppets.
The
Industrial Light and Sound doing Dino, the very early CGI.
Very, yeah.
It's like the CGI isn't that bad for something that's 30 years old.
Yeah, they use it sparingly, and they mix it with animatronics, which I appreciate.
But it's just like I don't know whether or not. You know, when you watch a movie and you don't know whether or not you've been indoctrinated from childhood.
Yeah.
I liked this movie, and I liked so many things about it. Like, first of all, I love puns.
Oh, well, there you go. They'll allow us to spoon feed this movie to you because this movie is all about that. Yeah, I think I'm picking on this movie a little bit just because it is such a strange artifact. I didn't hate watching it this time. Like, there's a lot of it that is very dumb. It's very broad. It's very, very silly. I think it simultaneously looks very expensive and very cheap. Like, the way that they turned the Utah desert into bedrock it's impressive in terms of like a production design, but in execution, there's something about it that it looks like a theme park.
Star Trek, the original series.
See, it reminds me of waiting in line at Universal Studios to go on like the Mummy ride or something.
It's because they used like the same material, which appeared to be like a foam, for so much of the set, and then painted over it, that it definitely has that feeling of like almost stage props or something, where it's like this was something thrown together by a prop department. This wasn't necessarily, but I think because of how much they had to fucking make for this movie, how big of a set they built and all of that it made, to me when I saw it, I was like, I mean, it makes sense because it's not like they can just go find these things in the world somewhere. Almost everything that's in the movie.
Well, and I think they do a great, like, have you ever seen the original cartoon?
Definitely yes, but nothing
like
that I would remember.
They really get the Hanna-Barbera God, I can never say it right.
Like the colors.
It's
and
The
styling.
Simpsons. yes.
The original art animation from the Flintstones, like the cars look the same. Like they really take on that cartoonish element in a real life situation. So I think it's really fun. Now I do think that the subject matter of the plot leaves a little bit to be desired, because like it's an embezzlement plot.
This is where the too many writers maybe comes into play here, because this is a movie that is squarely aimed at this is very much intending to be a very broad, silly live action cartoon. But then it's got a subplot about a couple that can't conceive and has problems adopting. And then there's issues with, a threatened infidelity. There are issues about money, about status, about class.
I don't think that there's ever threatened infidelity.
No, but it's dangled over the movie in the way that a lot of like...
Halle Berry's like very attractive.
Sure.
And the sexy saxophone that plays every time she's on screen.
You know who was originally supposed to play that role?
It was supposed to be Sharon Stone.
It was supposed to be Sharon. So the character's name is Sharon Stone. It was supposed to be Sharon Stone, and I think she had some scheduling conflicts.
I think Halle Berry does a terrific job in
she's great.
in that role, and like that outfit.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But
yeah, no, she's gorgeous, and like Kyle MacLachlan is chewing on the scenery and having a lot of fun. Like, I feel like even John Goodman said he was kind of dreading doing this movie, and he ended up having a good time with it, and it that comes across. I think people were having fun.
Before we get to the embezzlement plot, we start off with and I thought this movie did a really good job of having an everyday Flintstones life. A lot of movies sort of skip the everyday scene setting, and I thought they did an okay job doing, because the Flintstones was very much like the honeymooners in ancient times. So like so a lot of that humor doesn't translate, and I feel like it does a very good job of showing a loving relationship, even though like this is like the height of comedy at the time was like, my wife does what she wants and charges things, and I'm the man of the house, and blah 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 blah. It's very tired tropes, but they don't play on them too much to be annoying.
And like, even when they do, it's also in ways that are like not genuine, in the sense that like Fred will be like, oh, I'm the man of this house, and then be like immediately just like go, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
It's more of like an act as if the characters are kind of playing it up as a joke. And so it doesn't feel like the characters actually are that way. It feels like they're kind of mocking that way. Like they're playing it up as the character, which is the type of thing that I've seen happen with like friends' parents and stuff, where the guy's like, and he's like, all right, and what was it that you wanted, honey? And then like just very quickly like breaking that as a joke. And
Right.
Well, and I thought it was interesting because we got to comment on capitalism.
We do.
Because like
we do.
This is like this is from an era when like the Flintstones was very much working class.
Yeah.
Like he worked in a stone quarry. And so I feel like it's weird that the crux of this sort of like the conflict of it was Fred going outside of his social class and being like, and like him dressing up and being, I love the costume design in this because it's straight out of the cartoon, but also like it somehow works with like the stupid tie with the tunic.
It kind of reminded me of Scarface to a degree of like,
okay, how does that?
No, I'm curious.
Of like
that part where they use their stone hatchets to break up a bunch of cocaine and snort it?
Like the costuming and stuff of how it was like fancy clothes that are like kind of weird to a degree of like why are we wearing like cheetah,
right?
Like,
yeah,
it's that kind of like 70s 80s like weird kind of style.
Because you're not a mob wife.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm not.
No, I mean it's a movie that is like, sometimes you watch a movie and you're like, oh wow, I can't believe they managed to tackle so many issues and so like respectfully and so thoroughly, and like this is not one of those movies. This is a movie where they are throwing a lot of shit at you and it's not necessarily landing, it's not necessarily working. It is all going for a very broad sitcom style. But there's a real disconnect.
I didn't really laugh out loud, but I was always amused. Like
Sure.
there was always something to look at. I really found John Goodman to be charming as Fred. I love Rick Moranis. I feel like the Betty was kind of like a one-dimensional character.
So was Wilma, really.
Yeah.
The ladies kind of get short shifted in this one.
But the children were good actors considering how young they were. That was wild.
Yeah.
Like I was like, dude, these children are doing a lot of acting.
They're having to do a lot, and like there's a quality to this where you're just sort of like, oh, that's interesting how they pulled that off, or oh, that's interesting that they did that reference, or they've got a couple of horrifying puppets that I really enjoyed, like the poor dying garbage disposal, like made me really sad, and then they replaced him. I was like, and then the Dictabird and everything. Like I like a good puppet.
The poor garbage disposal dinosaur that gets replaced and then lives on the street.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my god.
There's just something about this movie, and I think this movie kind of encapsulates a very specific time of Hollywood blockbuster filmmaking where they really were not trying to hide how much of a product the movie is and how much like they're flaunting their product placements in like a really blatant way.
Yeah, I feel
like
that's a fair thing. It did feel like it almost felt like you're like, hey, let's go on the Flintstones ride at Warner Brothers Cinema.
It's very much that.
Okay.
I feel like the whole movie is just kind of pointing me towards the gift shop.
That reminded me of something that I saw recently on Reddit, but I think it was Chile, one of the South American countries, when Star Wars aired on TV, they would do all of the commercials as edited in product placement.
Oh yeah.
Which is fucking wild, because at one point it's like the time where they give Anakin's lightsaber to Luke.
Yeah.
And they it's like a drink instead.
Oh,
I'm like,
check.
This is fucking great.
Speaking of, like, check out. There's an old Flintstones commercial. It was a commercial that aired during the Flintstones where Fred and Barney are taking a break between scenes to hawk Winston cigarettes.
Yeah,
They sit and they
Oh,
smoke
what an
full
era.
packs of
That's a
Winston
good
cigarettes.
YouTube, like,
What an era.
old cigarette ads are a YouTube thing that you might want to go down to because
It's
they're
wild.
like they're
Yogi
pretty
the
wild.
bear selling cigs.
Hey, boo boo! I got the emphysema. But yeah, no, it's
Only you can prevent forest fires. Flicks the cigarette out of the woods.
yeah, no, I mean there's kind of an affable energy to this movie. You know, like this was also really the era where Spielberg was throwing around a lot of his power as a producer. So there were a lot of different things of like a Steven Spielberg produced thing has its own style, the way a Steven Spielberg directed thing has its own style. So
Well,
like you recognize a lot of these hallmarks.
And you talk about 4-quadrant movies. This is a movie you could see with your grandma or
Yeah.
your child or your
Yeah.
nephew or whatever.
I feel like there was definitely enough veiled adult references and stuff throughout where it was like anybody can watch this and enjoy it without it being like it's more of like if you know you know
Yeah.
and kids don't know.
But you know, I again, I'm not meaning to pick on the movie, but it does need to be said that there are many moments in this film that are just kind of annoying, like where sometimes the loud horns and the soundtrack and all the wacky whoas and bonks and sound effects and everything, it gets a
yabba
little
dabba
grating.
doo.
He's got a solid yabba dabba do.
He does.
I appreciate
I'm
that he
super
doesn't try
curious
and do
how
it.
they did the him on his tiptoes running. I was like, did they use wires?
Oh,
for
they
that?
must have used.
Oh,
wire.
absolutely,
Yeah.
probably pulling up on the shoulders.
I think
to-
they had like some rubber hobbit feet going on too, because they're like there's a horrifying scene. Like watching it now, like when I watched this as a kid, it was on a low def VHS, and whenever he puts up his foot on the table and says, "Sorry, I'm late. I had some car trouble. I hit a nail."
Yeah.
I always thought it was just like a flap of skin hanging off his foot, and I thought it was horrifying. I saw for the first time watching in HD that it is a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking that was like a really gory thing to throw into this movie, and it really
And
upset me.
It really, I mean, that makes you think a little bit where you're just like, damn. But also, I like how they have nails.
Yeah. Well, of course, yeah. They have-
I got a flat tire this week.
oh, lame.
Oh.
A nail in the sidewall, so I couldn't get it repaired.
Yeah,
I had
that's
to
a
get a
new-
whole new tire.
That's a whole.
I mean,
And then I had to
considering-
get a whole new tire to the tire next to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was so annoying.
And
Where are all these nails and screws coming
so,
from?
okay.
Oh no! You asked a car question.
There's a lot of construction happening in Austin, and there's a lot of people that are not storing things correctly when they're transporting it. So they're throwing a lot of just shit in the back of their trucks and stuff. That's why I have a crack in my windshield that is almost the entire width of the windshield. Is because a rock like the size of a pebble got kicked out of the back of a truck in front of me.
What about a
And-
rock the size of a Bam Bam?
Not a rock the size of a Bam Bam, but in areas with a lot of construction, they're not. APD has historically, in the last few years, not been giving a shit about most things traffic related.
Oh, fun.
And it's just been Wild West. People running red lights here and there. People with unsecured loads. People who should have tarps that aren't using tarps.
Yeah.
It's a whole nightmare. I
Oh,
hate
yeah.
it.
No, it's
Every
it's a
time
whole
I'm on
thing.
35, there's somebody that I look at and I'm like, that's not how you transport that.
Yeah.
You need more
Okay,
safety.
back to
involved.
the movie.
Back to the movie.
Back to the movie. This isn't illegal, but I did see somebody with a bumper sticker the other day that said, "This truck is a booby bouncer."
Oh,
And that's not illegal, but I'm thinking maybe we should introduce some legislation to just, to get rid of that sticker in particular. Because, yeah, that probably means he just has a bad suspension, I think. Yeah, so this is just a truly oddball movie to kind of be going back to in 2024. It has become a very interesting relic in a lot of different ways. It's become it's not like quite a disaster, but it also doesn't fully work either. There's just something a little amateurish about it.
One thing that you kind of have to give some props to is that it. Not necessarily that it didn't age well, but it aged like none of it didn't age well in the sense of like
Yeah.
there was no humor that we would look at.
there's only one thing.
What was the one thing?
The stringing them up. That was a little bit of
that
ouch.
wasn't great. Yeah.
What part was that?
It was like towards the end when
when the crowd is angry.
Yeah, it's an angry mob
okay.
scene.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. No, but they're it's just even back in the 90s, like I think this was looked at as kind of like a tacky looking movie in a lot of ways, because it has people like, you can admire the style and you can admire the thought that get into it, but compare this with like a new movie. Compare this with Barbie, which similarly
Barbie is amazing
No,
though.
but I'm saying that that's a movie that also is attempting a very artificial looking kind of staged world, but they add a little bit more vibrance and a little bit more life into it. Like, you can't see the plastic shimmering, even though everything's supposed to be made of plastic in this one. In this one, everything looks like it has a coat on it. Like, it looks like it's weather resistant in a way. But I mean, I will give them credit, because a live action cartoon is kind of a hard needle to thread in a lot of ways. And this movie does it better than many others. I would say maybe George of the Jungle does it better.
Do you think there could ever be a
Scooby-Doo.
live action Simpsons?
Oh, what?
I don't want there to be. I know it's been tossed around. They even made that joke on The Simpsons, where Homer says they suggest John Goodman to play him in that too, and he says, no, that's too obvious. I want Gary Oldman. So that's... it's been tossed around. I think it would be horrifying. I think Matt Groening said he wouldn't allow it to happen while he was alive, but we'll see. We'll see about that. I don't want that to happen though, because there is just a tonal disconnect with these live action cartoons for me. This does not reach the depths of another movie we're sadly going to be talking about in the future, Cat in the Hat, or the live action Jim Carrey Grinch movie, but like those just don't really work, because there's something a little cringy about watching adults trying to move their bodies like cartoons.
I don't know. I feel like this one really worked, because I feel both Rick Moranis and John Goodman had a really good job of using their face in a cartoonish way.
Yeah,
like their overreactions felt accurate in the sense that they were overacting, but not a ton. Like, they were hitting that sweet spot of, like, that cartoonish behavior without it being too egregious.
Yeah.
And so I felt that the two of them, for sure, did a pretty good job. I think Rick Moranis did pretty fantastic throughout.
He's doing weirdly understated work for the role. But, despite this movie being pretty successful at the time, they hesitated on the sequel, and then they weirdly made the decision to double the budget and bring back the director, but none of the original cast, and make it a prequel.
So terrible.
I've never seen it. It's called Viva Rock Vegas. It came out in 2000, and it's now Mark Addy, Stephen Baldwin, Kristen Johnson, and Jane Krakowski. Is that right? I think so. That's the lineup, and then Alan Cumming as the Great Gazoo. So that movie was a massive flop, and I think you see a lot of studios are kind of like, all right, we got away with this once. We got a big box office hit out of this one time. Let's not push it. That's why we never got a sequel.
Out.
Yeah.
With actors that, like, you need John Goodman in this role. You need
Stephen Baldwin is not substituting for anybody. I love Mark Addy, but he is not substituting for Fred Flint, for John Goodman in this, and Stephen Baldwin is definitely no substitute for Rick Moranis.
John Goodman is such a good actor. He's had such a good career. Like, he's so good in Righteous Gemstones.
Yeah.
Most recently, I haven't seen The Conners. Have you seen it?
I was watching it in the first season when it was still Roseanne. I found it to be pretty hard to watch.
Yeah.
And then they got rid of Roseanne. Apparently, the show got really good after that.
Okay.
But I don't know. I just found it weirdly kind of unfocused and low energy. But I don't really like it when they reboot movies and TV shows way after the fact. Like, everybody just always looks so old and tired, and like it just feels a little undignified to me. Maybe I'm being I don't know why I'm coming down so snobby on the Flintstones movie.
Then definitely watch Righteous Gemstones.
Okay. I've been meaning to get that on the list. I've been meaning to watch that, and I haven't gotten to it yet. Let's move on and talk about the game a little bit here, because, of course, this has a video game tie-in. What else are we doing here? This game came out in February 1995. It was developed and published by Ocean Software. It was available on the Super NES and the Game Boy. Weirdly, there is a long history of Flintstones video games. That's not really the weird part. The weird part is that they tend to be very expensive on the secondary market. Like, for instance, there's an NES game called The Flintstones Surprise at Dinosaur Peak that I think is one of the 5 rarest games on the entire system. It'll probably cost you a couple $1,000s for a loose cartridge of that Flintstones platforming game. So, you know, for whatever reason, they're tend to be hard to find. This wound up being the second to last Flintstones video game ever, though. There's only one more. It came out in 2000, and it's called Bedrock Bowling for the PlayStation 1. It's supposed to be famously terrible.
Why was there so many bowling games?
Man, they really went for it.
That was an era.
There was a terrible Simpsons bowling game, too. Another collaboration.
There's
really
so
bad.
much bowling.
Yeah. Not as bad as the Simpsons wrestling. That thing was fucking unplayable. But yeah, that's definitely the worst of them. But this game, as the box art helpfully points out, is the one and only game based on the movie The Flintstones and not the animated characters The Flintstones, which creates an interesting kind of animation challenge for the developers here. But this movie came out in time for the home video release in some markets. It still felt a little delayed. The Game Boy and Super NES versions received physical releases, but here's the interesting one. Sega Genesis did have a version of this that was only available on the Sega Channel. Are you guys familiar with the Sega Channel?
No.
This is kind of like the earliest form of streaming games. This came out in like 95 or 96. It was a modem that you plugged into your Sega Genesis, and at your whatever like snail pace modem that would take up all of your bandwidth, but you could download and stream games for your Sega Genesis on this channel. You needed to have a special subscription through your cable network, I think, and then an extra peripheral that you plugged into your Genesis. I always really wanted to do it. We didn't get by the time we got internet in my house, this thing had been discontinued. It was just very early internet. But now you look at it, it's like it was a little ahead of its time in that regard. But this game was only available through the Sega Channel on the Genesis. You can't find a physical copy of that. Now, as for the game itself... Oh, you found something?
Other than the fact that I don't think it was ever available in my region.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because it was only Time Warner Cable.
Oh, all right. Yeah,
and,
that would explain it.
We definitely didn't get Time Warner.
It's possible I didn't get it in my region either, but I just remember reading about it in like Nintendo Power back in the day and just thinking that sounded amazing. It wasn't Nintendo Power because that was a Sega system, but it was a gaming magazine back in the day. Wow. Yeah, so interesting thing, but much more interesting than this game, I would argue. This is about as standard a platforming game as...
I think that's a good word for it, standard.
Very standard. Not terrible, but like...
It's not terrible. It's entertaining. It's not like gripping like the Disney platforming games.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, it's like inoffensive.
Yeah, it is. It is. I will give them credit for kind of threading this needle of so obviously they can't use the pixel perfect graphics of the live action actors here. So they need to kind of split the difference, right? It's like a semi-realistic looking head of John Goodman in the movie that moves like Fred in the cartoon.
When I said inoffensive, I actually was wrong. Because it definitely, they make Fred Flintstone out of breath all the time in a really offensive way.
Yeah.
That's true.
Like he's a big guy, but he's very strong in this movie. He's very like physically large and like kind of tough.
Because he works in a stone quarry.
Yeah, but like he's panting for breath every time you hold still in this game, and that's
like every time you hold still.
Yeah, it feels a little offensive, but. You get access to a bowling ball and some rocks that you can throw. I do like that you can retrieve your projectiles.
Yes.
Always nice, especially like you're not having to run around hunting for new ones. You can just pick them up off the ground. I also like that enemies don't respawn, so you don't have that annoying thing of like, oh, I dropped my rock, let me go back and get it. Oh, he's back, and I have to go through
or as J-Ban watched me do, trying to go up a ledge and then falling off of the cliff next to the ledge.
Yeah.
5 times, I think.
Yeah.
And then having to go back through all of the level up to that point.
But I am going to say I feel like the controls in this were not super responsive.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
We were picking on J-Ban for jumping into pits a lot, but then when each of us tried to do it, we also immediately fell into the pit because the jump button is not very reactive, right? Like, You need to get a running start at everything, and it just feels a little bit delayed. And I think that's just because of how many frames of animation they put in.
And we finally found out how to grab ledges.
Yeah.
Which J-Band technically figured out. Is that you have to jump, and while holding up, you have to hit A again to grab the ledge. But, I mean...
This is definitely of that era of games where, like... It's not clear that you can climb up the ledge, and if you can, you need to be extremely specific where you stand.
And this is information that I can only imagine was in the packaging with the game when it released.
Oh, yeah, that's always the case, yeah.
And so we missed out on that a little bit. But once we figured it out, we were kind of progressing a bit, but it just was a bit of a slog.
It was. We never really got very far in this because, like we said, the controls are not super responsive, and your hitbox is really kind of finicky. Weirdly, like, we were doing a pretty good job avoiding the rolling boulders and the big, strong cavemen. The one that was fucking us up every single time,
fucking
the
frogs.
Fucking
It's just
frogs.
a stupid
Suck.
frog.
I've never in my life wanted to throw a rock at a frog.
Yeah.
But this game, man, I was throwing rocks at frogs left and right.
This is the prehistoric version of the dog in Duck Hunt. You know, this is the annoying, irascible thing that shouldn't be irritating you as much as it does, but you just wish you could throw a rock at it. Yeah, whatever reason, those frogs kept jumping, because this game kind of does that weird thing where, like, you can jump on enemies and it looks like you're okay, but, like, then you'll start blinking and you realize you did actually take damage. You know, you won't realize it until you're back on the ground, but the game makes you think that you can jump on these frogs and you can't.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. So we never got all that far. We did look ahead with some Let's Plays. The follow-up level, it looked kind of interesting, at least, because it's kind of an old-school arcade. I'm forgetting the name of what the original arcade game is. I think of this as the mini game from Earthworm Jim 2, where you're trying to catch a bunch of puppies on a pillow. Like, that's basically what's that, and you have to bounce it into the barn from there.
I see what you're saying.
That's what you're doing with Pebbles and Bam Bam. You are using the roof of your car to kind of move them across the level.
As a father should.
As a father should. It's responsible parenting, you know. It was the 90s. So, yeah, you knock them up high, and they'll collect gems for you, and then you need to catch them as they come back down. You know, kind of fun. And there's a little bit of level variety with, you know, your standard platformer tropes. Outside of Bedrock, you have a jungle, and then the inside of a volcano, and then there's the factory at the end. Your goal is to save all of your family members and your neighbors from the Kyle MacLachlan character, who is just a kidnapper
because
now.
he just like walks up and then just like grabs your wife and then just walks away, and you're like, I guess this is what we're doing now.
Look, the law was different back then. It was, it was 1994. You could just take people. No.
Well, he did the same thing with the kid, too. And you're just like, what am I not going to react to this? Am I just going to let the kid get taken?
Yeah. So, I mean, in that regard, it's, again, another Simpsons parable, or parallel, where the Simpsons arcade game had Smithers just kind of swoop in and steal Maggie, and you have to go catch him. You know, that's just a thing people did in video games back then. But it all feels like a pretty... It's competent but pretty lazy, you know, and I think it's falling into that zone that so many games, I think, kind of fall into for us, where it's just like there's nothing inherently terrible about this, you know, and if you play it under the right circumstances, you might have a good time, but there's not really a lot that's going to keep you coming back.
It's definitely one of those things where they were like, it doesn't really matter how successful this is.
I could have played this for a while, as opposed to like some of the games that we play, in which case, like the sooner that I never see it again, the better. But it's definitely like it's just sort of like it's a platformer. And
but I mean, the last platformer
with sort of stiff controllers.
The last platformer that we played that was
Stiff
made
controls.
by Ocean was the Addams Family games, which
so
you really
good.
enjoyed. You know, like they had a lot more juice to them, a lot more like secret passages and little things that you could find. You know, this one's pretty standard move left to right. You know, definitely not the worst one that we've played on this show, but not necessarily a highlight either. I think that's where I come down on. Do we have any final things to say about this Flintstones movie/game? do not.
Just silence.
Well, let's move on to our rankings then. Is this a good movie, good game, bad movie, bad game, or somewhere in between? I will let you guys go first because I actually need to think on this one. I don't really know.
Justin,
where
you
I'm gonna
go
land
first.
on these.
What the fuck? Okay. I think it was a good movie and a game.
Okay.
Not good game, but a game.
I'm taking away that rating for you. Every time you don't want to commit, you say it's a game, it's a movie.
Like, it's on the edge of like, I would technically consider it a bad game, but not, again, it was better than the Alex Rider games.
Yeah, sure.
It was a playable game. I don't think it was great. Maybe it was a good game then.
There you go.
Maybe it was a kind of good game.
That's, yeah.
Almost a good game.
I'll accept it. I'll accept it.
Okay.
The arbiter has spoken.
I think that I find this to be an entertaining movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say with childhood nostalgia, I'm going to say good movie.
Okay.
It's good is such a subjective word. Like,
Yeah.
I was entertained by this movie, and I was entertained 30 years later watching this movie.
Yeah.
And I love the production design. I think the acting is really good and fun. It's a bit simplistic, but I just like it's fun, and it's and sometimes you just want a fun movie.
Yeah.
And I think for the game, I'm going to say okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I will say, and this is the last time I'm going to bring it up, but if there were an award for falling in a hole, the Holies, let's call it, I think you'd be a proud Holy recipient. I'm just saying. I think you found new and innovative ways to fall into a hole. But
That is true.
It's also on the game because it respawns you over the pit sometimes.
I also solved how to jump up the ledge because like Justin couldn't figure out the ledge.
I was so
for like
fucking
5
clueless.
minutes, and I'm like, here, let me do it. And
I was like, no, I'm so annoyed. I want to figure it out for myself. I want to have that satisfaction.
And I had to figure out for him.
Yeah.
So swings and roundabouts.
So you get some props for that at the very least. Well, thank you everyone for listening. We are Cinemarcade at all the different social media sites. If you'd like to find us on there, we have an email, cinemarcadepodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. And you know what? If you're an Apple Podcast user, why don't you hop over there, give us a 5-star rating and a review. That helps increase our visibility and lets people know about the show. So we would greatly appreciate it if you could do that as an Apple user or wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you have any random pop culture questions, we are the experts on all.
Yes,
and so we can
everything.
give you the correct opinions for everything, including, but not limited to, music.
Exactly. Yes, we will give you all. We will let Justin handle that. He's going to tell you everything you need to know about POD. But in the meantime, next week we are jumping back into another mini series. It's been a little bit since we've done a series. This is going to be an interesting one. This is we're going to be playing 3 games, which is not indicative of the length of the series, but it does interestingly kind of cover the breadth of the series. You'll see what I mean because we're talking about Rocky.
Oh my
We are going to be playing.
Oh my god!
We're 3 games, 3 movies. We're going to be playing Rocky Balboa, which is the 6th movie, and Creed. All right, those are going to be our 3 Rocky movies that we are talking about. It jumps around a little bit. It's going to encompass a little bit of the whole franchise, but those are the 3 specific ones. Kind of makes for a good. If you've seen the Rocky movies, that kind of makes for an interesting kind of touch point of the series. It sort of cuts out certain elements of the series and sort of dilutes it.
So we're gonna watch what numbers? 1,
6, and 7.
6.
Technically, I
So
guess
There's
Creed,
no 2. There's no Rocky 2.
through
No,
5?
no.
Doesn't matter.
I guess technically there is a game loosely based on Rocky 3 for the ColecoVision. So we could
what?
We could throw Rocky 3 in there if we want.
Wait, what's a ColecoVision?
ColecoVision was
How do I not know
that
this?
was the rival to the Atari. Atari. The ColecoVision, the Intellivision were the two rivals to the Atari.
Okay, this makes
so that
sense.
game may not be very easy for us to find, so we may just mention it. But
Okay, well before my time.
either way, it's going to be a lot of fun. So step into the ring with us. Ding, ding. Gotta fly now. We're playing Rocky next week.
I'm going to quote Rocky at you so hard.
I am looking forward to it. Bring it on.
Yeah, I have very little experience with Rocky, so this will be a good time.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it. I'm excited for you to get into it.
Fucking classic.
Yes.
All of them. All of them.
Really?
All of them.
I don't think there's a bad one, but yeah, that's just me. All right, we'll talk about it next week. See you guys.